Don't be recording yet because I'll be saying a couple of jokes. So
Oh, should I pause? Should I pause?
you can record. All right. I would like to thank everybody during this really tough times. I still have to say that in the summer of 2020, DOJ, Department of Justice, announced that there are 3 cities of anarchy. And you can imagine which those 3 cities are. The honor goes to what? Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington. And guess what is the 3rd city that belongs to the company? New York City. So we are brothers and sisters. Also, I feel like that I do know some of you, and I have been coming back my summer home, which is Portland, Oregon. So I don't consider this as anything webinar or presentation. We're just having a good conversation. And I feel like I am a female pilot saying, relax and enjoy the ride. So that's what I would like to say. Relax and enjoy the ride. And Blake, I'm so glad that you are drinking coffee. Enjoy and relax. And Jamie, great to see you. So while we enjoy and relax and enjoy the ride, we are going to do a little bit of thought partners about what's going to happen. So this is really, we don't have any answer. It's not about the strategies tomorrow, but it's just thinking about what will happen. Because the honor goes to you for being progressive and I'm kidding. Right? So we are going to talk about computational thinking and modeling integrated into science. And Ellie is going to do most of the talking, but I'm just going to set up the stage for why we are here and we're thinking. And Jamie, I'm really going to talk to you. Jamie, I understand that you're also speaking with Corey Buxton. He says that he loves working with you. I just wanted to say. He's my younger brother.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. That's great.
He's my younger brother. All the people will say you don't look like each other. So the context. So we're just talking about the hybrid and remote and in-person instruction. So starting from, sadly, we are commiserating and not celebrating, commiserating 1 year of a lockdown. At NYU here, our lockdown started on March 13th of 2020 with the announcement that we'll be closed for a couple of weeks. So it's a very sad story of where we are. Now this is transition. And here is a SAIL, and some of you may know about the science and the integrated language. And we have including computational thinking and modeling curriculum and plastic pollution. But here's a plastic pollution. And COVID-19 affected our research and especially Ellie very directly. The 3rd unit on Earth systems, especially the plastic pollution as an engineering project, was the best section of our work. And we just finished a teacher advisory board meeting and we were ready to do this unit on plastic pollution and why do we care and flatten the curve, keep it under control and all of those things. And we're just ready. And then 2 days later, we heard, nope, schools are closed. No more research and nothing. So Ellie said, damn, all the work that we did just got shut down. So for us, it's very emotional. But we also got somewhat of a redemption a little bit later. And this is sometime early spring. And coronavirus in the Washington Post. Now, what is important about it? When I was here for the OSTA and WSTA, or the Oregon State Association, we were sharing about this, and I was just so impressed that everybody in the participation, about 75 of them, all said, yes, I know, we played it, we even did it on Twitter, and we did something gaming. So I said, oh, wow. And I thought, Oregon teachers are just ahead of the game. Jamie, they all played. ahead of the game. All right, I was so impressed until sometime later. And this is what is so striking. So here's what you know about.
Oki, do you want to share your screen?
I'm not sharing?
No.
Oh, gee, we always make mistakes. All right,
I'm sorry.
I'll
Okay,
go-
that's like that moment when you're teaching and you're
All
like
right,
30
context.
minutes
All
in
right.
and the kids are like, I can't hear you.
All right. You just imagined. All right, here is, that's what I mean. Here is a plastic pollution, our third unit on Earth systems, and we were doing design, and Ellie was so gung-ho to go to the research and classroom implementation until we were told that nope, schools are closed and no, there is no way to do. So this is a computer simulation in the Washington Post of a computer simulation. It's how to do the social distancing, and they were so clever. Here's an example of a computer models using COVID-19. And here is something free for all and everybody. This one does not show people get sick and then recover. And then healthy and get sick and recover. And here is a healthy, and if you're doing extensive distancing, almost like isolation, then most of the people stay healthy and some people recover. Well, we don't think about a lot of people here, not a lot, some people here die. Not everybody recovers. Now, that's one. The second is that here is something that I am not as impressed by the Oregon teachers during the conference. Why is that? I was following the news media, and then this is New Year's news, December 29th, and I saw this article. In the early days of pandemic, we created a simple simulation demonstrating how social distancing can slow down. All right, I was very, very excited. And it says it was translated into 13 languages and became the most viewed story in the history of the Post. Do you see it? So you are not the elite group anymore. Actually, the public enjoyed it. This is how the society is going. So it's really, really humbling that people are going into the computer models, computer science and data science and all of that. So this is a reality. Why does it matter? So being part of the NGSS, I thought that NGSS was cool. Students were scientists and engineers figuring out. Well, this is the reality. We may be getting into the next set of science standards, and it may not be clean science. It could be STEM, addressing multiple complex societal issues, using multiple science and engineering disciplines. Think about it. Now, here is a sad thing, and here's a computer model, and I will say, just to say, and I will say, it's not enough though, because when we say COVID, it is all about systemic racism in society. We cannot think about COVID-19 and climate change without thinking about who is dying. So let me just share a storyline. Here is as of yesterday. Here is the global cases. US is an overachiever. We make up about the 25% of the cases in the world, and we make up only 4% of the population in the world. We are overachievers. We have a dubious distinction. Now, when you look at the death, it is about the 20%, and that's again 5 times of the population that we have. So here's a COVID-19, and this is, we have never flattened the curve, and it's going up, and that is so scary. Why is it important? Here's when you have a chance to build back better, and I hope that you have a chance to visit the administration's website. Build Back Better. During the campaign, this is the campaign promise of COVID-19, climate change, because they are disproportionately affecting minorities, and climate is being used for economic recovery and jobs. Those are 4. What is interesting is that they are systems thinking. They are all related. You cannot do one in the absence of. COVID-19 kills minorities. Climate hurts minorities. The other one is that this is an alternate universe to the previous one. I thought that there was no room for science, there was no room for equity for a year and 5 years. When I saw this, I said, science has a place, equity has a place, and we are players. Do you see my excitement? Why is that? Because right now, these are 7 priorities, and how they are organized. COVID-19, climate, healthcare are science. Racial equity and immigration background are equity. And if we do these 3 and 2, 5 right, that will relate to economy, and the economy will restore America's global standing. So it's a STEM and equity. I hope that you're excited. What is also exciting is this. When I think about COVID-19, climate, and healthcare, these are STEM disciplines. Racial equity and immigration. So my committee, the role of education. And why? Because it's all standards and all students. We thought that up to before the framework and the standards, my internet connection is a little bit unstable. I'm coming back. Okay. And scientists and teachers that define the science knowledge and given to students. And some students thought the science is cool. Most of the students said that science make no sense to me. Now it is all standards and all students. And students are doing sense making and phenomenon and solving problems. And like scientists and engineers. And this is us right now, present. And I thought this is really cool. Well, we are in the future and present at the same time. If you think that NGSS are demanding, well, future is right with us. So all standards and students, and what is the future? This is what we are pushing for. Where do we go? Because if we do not define as a STEM education what our future is for the role of a STEM education, someone else may tell us what to do and we may not be happy about it. So we better do something about what we wanted to do and how we define it. And I ask STEM educators to think about what is our role. So Ellie is going to give us some answers. Ellie, your turn. Give us the answers. I'm done.
Okay, I'm going to flip to my slides. 1 second. Okay, can you see the screen okay? Excellent. So hi everyone. First, Oki, thank you for that context. It's crazy to see the COVID graphs and exciting all at the same time to think about the future. We really are living in just wild times. I want to briefly just introduce myself. My name is Allie, and I am the Director of Development and Implementation for the grants that Oki and I and our incredible team at NYU work on. Specifically, I was the lead curriculum writer for the computational thinking and modeling work and curriculum that we do. And it's that work, the CTM work, that I'm really excited to share and talk about and discuss today. Hopefully, I can share a little bit about what we've done, what we've learned, and most importantly, how our work can potentially help you in your classrooms, in your schools, or in your districts. So I want to start by hearing from you so we can all get a sense of where the group is at. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rank your computational thinking and modeling, your CTM knowledge level? So a 1, complete novice, you're a beginner, don't know much about CTM. 2 would be an advanced beginner, know the basics of CTM. 3, pretty good knowledge of CTM. 4, proficient, you could confidently teach CTM today. Or 5, an expert, you could facilitate the PD for CTM. If everyone would type your number into the chat box to see the scope that we have, that'd be great. Oh, excellent. We have some experts in here. That's awesome. And a little bit of a range as well. Okay, so we have a range of expertise. That's great. That's helpful. Thank you. So I want to organize our discussion today into 4 topics. First, I want to spend a little bit of time defining CTM. There's several definitions of CTM, and even the field struggles to one agreed upon definition of this term. So I want to share a little bit about how we think about CTM. Second, I want to defend why we think CTM is important, and I will ground that discussion in the findings of our own research that we've done. Third, I want to share some tips and suggestions that we have for implementing CTM in your schools, classrooms, or districts. And, at the end of the day, we really want to share some practical and useful tips and resources that you can use. And finally, and most importantly, Oki and I will end with a whole group discussion that we can have questions and answers, and also kind of weave the conversation wherever the group would like to take it. Okay, so in terms of what is CTM, CTM stands for computational thinking and modeling. So this term, CTM, includes computational thinking, which you see here in red, and then computational modeling, which you see in blue. So let's take a look at computational thinking first. Okay, so if you don't know, this woman, Jeanette Wing, is known as really the person who coined this term computational thinking. I find this woman incredibly impressive she's done everything from being the vice president of Microsoft Research to a professor at Carnegie Mellon to the director of the Data Science Institute over at Columbia. And in 2006, Jeanette Wing published this breakout paper that defined computational thinking as this way of thinking that involves solving problems, designing systems, and understanding human behavior by drawing on the concepts fundamental to computer science. This was really important because she argued that computational thinking was a fundamental skill that everyone should have, not just computer science. So I really like how she frames computational thinking as this thought process involved in formulating a problem and expressing its solution in a way that a computer, human, or machine can effectively carry out. Computational thinking is what comes before any computing technology. So you might not realize it, but you think computationally every day. Let's look at a couple of examples. Let's say that you're at the grocery store, you're ready to check out, and there's 20 different checkout lines. And there's that moment when you have to stop and think to decide what line you're going to go to. Now, if you're anything like me, you will always inevitably pick the wrong line. But you know that thinking that I'm talking about, that thinking where you determine what line are you going to go to is something that in the tech world we call performance modeling for multi-server systems. You just engaged in computational thinking. Okay, or we had a ton of snow in New York City, as I know you all did too this winter. So let's say that I've been renting ice skates to go ice skating, but it's been snowing so much that I've been ice skating more. And I go through this cost analysis to decide, okay, Allie, at what point does it make sense to just buy the skates? That thinking, when to rent versus when to buy, that is similar to an online algorithm. Again, you're thinking computationally. Or we can use a curriculum example. So to show the transfer of matter and energy through an ecosystem, we have our students physically represent different organisms. They think about, for example, how a decrease in algae could impact an organism who doesn't even eat algae. The students are thinking in levels, which is another example of computational thinking. Okay, so let's turn to computational modeling. Computational modeling is a practice of computational thinking, and one way that computational thinking is being integrated into schools. So in its simplest form, computational modeling is when students use computers to create representations of complex systems. So computational models are computer models. Computational models are these non-static representations of phenomena that can be simulated by a computer. Now, based on the responses you gave earlier, I'm sure that most of you are familiar with some online tools that students can use to develop computational models. You might have heard of these things like Scratch or Star Logo Nova. Those are blocks-based tools, and where students use blocks to develop programs or models. By blocks, I mean that instead of this traditional programming language, which you see on the screen, the interface of the code is in literal blocks. So as you can see on the slide, the blocks use familiar language like set my color to color red. And these blocks allow students to program computational models like the one that you see on the slide. So to implement CTM, computational thinking and modeling, into classrooms, our team developed SAIL+CTM. So we at NYU worked with our colleagues at MIT and Vanderbilt to develop this curriculum, science and integrated language, plus computational thinking and modeling. So in its simplest form, SAIL+CTM is a 5th grade year-long curriculum. We're excited that it's a full year's worth of material. It's NGSS-aligned, and CTM is embedded directly into the science instruction. Now, this is where I get excited because the CTM part of the curriculum isn't done in a technology block or an after-school block, but it's done right during, quote, typical science instruction. So all of the examples that I'll share today come from SAIL+CTM. Okay, so I want to transition to why CTM. I want to talk about why we think CTM is important, especially in science classrooms. And to do that, I want to use some of the findings and results that we've had from implementing SAIL+CTM with our teachers. So why CTM? Well, like Oki talked about, most noticeably, the world is changing. Like, we are in a global pandemic, and that pandemic, for better or for worse, has boosted the use of digital learning. Right now, it is the norm, even for elementary students, to be using computers in their classrooms. And at the same time, new standards are redefining curriculum. The Common Core standards, for example, embed the use of technology and digital media with this goal of preparing students for college and workforce training and life in a technological society. Similarly, the NGSS named mathematical and computational thinking as a science and engineering practice. In short, technology, computer science, computational thinking, and modeling are prominent in the standards. And finally, as you know, our classrooms are changing. So there's greater access to tools like smartboards, tablets, clickers, and computers. All of this to say that the world is changing, and we need CTM to prepare students for this technologically advanced society. You know, like Oki was saying, those statistics that we would talk about in the future, computer science is going to be incredibly important, is quickly becoming the present. So we were excited to find that CTM helps students explain phenomena. So in one of our units, students are trying to figure out what happens to their garbage over time. They develop these open and closed landfill bottles that you see on the screen, where they observe that food materials decompose over time. And there's this big aha moment in the classroom where students are shocked that the weight of the closed landfill bottle stays the same, even though the food materials appear to vanish. So using agar plates, the students observe the presence of microbes in the landfill bottles. And so they develop diagrammatic models to show what's happening in these landfill bottle systems. So students figure out that microbes cause the food materials to decompose. However, we found that students still struggled describing how do the microbes decompose the food items so that the weight of the closed system stays the same even as the food items appear to vanish. Enter CTM. Students develop computational models to show how microbes decompose the solid banana, for example, into a, quote, gas banana. And in their models, as you see on the screen, they include microbes, the banana solid, the banana gas, and they program those components or agents to represent their different ideas. It's in developing these computational models, we found that students are able to use those models to represent different ideas, which helps them inevitably explain the phenomenon. Okay, so for example, we interviewed students about their models, and one student, as you can see, Francisco, said, okay, this is our first idea. When the microbes, that spelling always cracks me up, eat the banana solid, they eat it, so the banana solid is just poof, gone, it got deleted. So in this example, you can see that Francisco is programming this microbe so that on collision, when the microbe collides with the banana solid, it's going to delete the banana solid. So Francisco is not accounting for banana gas. Lucia, on the other hand, has a different idea. She describes, well, see, we made these microbes, and let me show you. So the microbes hit that banana solid, and we coded it so it deletes the banana solid, then it like moves back a little, like 5. And then it creates banana, 1 banana gas. So notice how Francisco and Lucia are able to represent different ideas in their models. And what's cool or powerful is that Francisco's group was able to revise their model over time to add these gas particles and ultimately explain the phenomenon. Okay, so another reason we advocate for CTM is because we found that it forces students to think like agents. On the screen, you see a diagrammatic model that is showing the movement of matter and energy through an ecosystem. In the curriculum, as part of CTM, students develop what we call embodied models, where they use their actual bodies to model ideas. So in this example, students in the class act like different organisms in the ecosystem. So they take the perspective of that organism and quite literally act like that agent. For example, when a predator eats a prey, that prey will give its physical matter and energy cards to the predator. And students are able to think about how, for instance, a decrease in algae could affect an organism even though they might not directly eat the algae. So along with that, students also develop computational models. Like you can see on the screen, they program each organism. And we found that as students are programming, they are thinking like the agent, and it's really cool. We'll see students in their talk acting like the organisms. So let me give you an example. When the students are coding the tiger salamander, they go into this gear where they go into first person and they'll say things like, I need to find and eat the fairy shrimp. So it's cool because prior to CTM, we didn't see students really taking that agent-based perspective as much. Okay, I know this is getting long. I have 2 more reasons that I want to share about why we advocate for CTM, and then I'll stop. So CTM promotes data analysis and interpretation. In the computational models, students are able to develop graphs, like you can see on the screen, and which lets them collect data and interpret data. This is a screenshot from our engineering unit. So here, students are trying to reduce the amount of plastic pollution in their local community. And so the computational models allow students to model different ideas and collect data about those ideas, which allows them to think about their design solution more critically. And finally, CTM encourages systems thinking, which is often very difficult, especially for our 5th grade students. So this is a screenshot of a space model that the students develop. They're trying to figure out why do falling stars fall to Earth. The computational model visualizes students this immensely large system. Okay, so we found that CTM not only is important, but it helps students develop their science understanding, which is really powerful. So before we get to the discussion, I want to share a few tips and suggestions for implementing CTM in your own school or classroom. The first one is to not be intimidated. all of our 5th grade science teachers had no CTM experience at the beginning of the year. I repeat, all of our 5th grade teachers had no CTM experience. I'm talking one of our teachers had trouble turning on her computer and would joke with us at PD about it. And I also think it's really important to kind of share the atmosphere. They were nervous to integrate CTM into science instruction. They were overwhelmed. They felt like it was too much. At the end of the year, not only did all teachers successfully implement CTM, but they enjoyed it and they felt like it really improved student science understanding, which for them was really motivating. So I just want to share 2 teacher quotes with you. One of our teachers said, at the beginning of the year, I was so nervous about teaching CTM. I mean, I didn't think I could do it, but not only was it manageable, it was fun. The kids knew so much more than I expected, and their understanding just skyrocketed. Another teacher said, the fact that I am a CTM teacher still blows my mind. I'm walking proof that if I can do it, anyone can do it. And I would tell a teacher thinking about teaching this to give it a try because it seriously created some magic in my classroom. The point here is that our teachers found the worrying about CTM, that fear of implementation, worse than the actual implementation itself. And it was kind of a journey we were all interested to see. When they went to go implement, the students had a surprising amount of knowledge, and the students in many cases were better with the technology than the teachers and able to do some really incredible things. The second kind of tip I would share is we adhere to a use, modify, and create approach. By that, I mean, we never give kids just a blank slate to start. We use things like starter models where we can give kids some base code that they can modify to create their own models. It also lets us do some more sophisticated coding or graphs for the kids in that starter model that, again, then they can use and modify. We also use tools like reference guides that help students with more complicated coding. Again, all of this to say that if you use CTM in the classroom, make sure that you scaffold and support students. I want to be clear that it's a tough balance sometimes. We don't want to do the work for students. We still want them to do the programming and the thinking, but at the same time, we don't want students to reach that point of frustration where the task is no longer fun. It's just completely frustrating. Third, start small. I think you'd be surprised that a few minutes of CTM kind of tossed into a free block or an indoor recess can lead to a lesson, which can lead to a unit, which can lead to, before you know it, a year. Also, I want to share that there are so many resources now of easy, simple to use, ready to go tasks that you could do in your classroom tomorrow. And I'm going to share those resources with you at the end today so that you can take a look at them. Now, with that said, while you want to start small, we'd hope that over time, you'll make CTM part of the science understanding. We found that all students can use computational models in service of science understanding. We, for example, work with a large number of English learners and found that students, and Ls in particular, were able to use less than perfect English and multiple modalities when engaging in CTM. 2 more ideas. 1, group students intentionally. We have found that our magic number is 2 students working to 1 computer, as you see on the screen. When we put more than that on a laptop, we kind of found that 1 student would be a bit left out or didn't have an active task. 1 more grouping thought, we have the structure where we have investigation groups of about 4 students. And then in that investigation group, we will have CTM partners of 2 and 2. So it's nice because the 2 sets of CTM partners will check in with each other. So that group of 4 splits into 2 and 2, and then comes back together for discussions and things like that. And last but not least, have fun. I have to say that integrating CTM into instruction has been some of the most rewarding teaching that I've done. I want to share one more teacher quote. People come into my classroom and cannot believe the work that my students are doing. Students, even the ones who struggle in other classes, are programming, talking, figuring out deep, meaningful science phenomena, and absolutely thrilled about it. It's what you dream of as a teacher, and the fact that I'm the one successfully teaching these kids to code, well, it's one of the coolest things that I've seen in my 14 years of teaching. So I kind of want to wrap up just by saying I know it's hard. I know that asking teachers to add another thing, yet another thing, is overwhelming, even unfair at times. You know, I could go into this soapbox speech, you know, that teachers need support and time and money. But at the end of the day, I've found that students love CTM, and seeing those students so engaged is why you teach. So I think there's a lot of promise here. So I'm going to toss it back to Oki in a moment. I'm really excited for a whole group discussion. We wanted to leave plenty of time today. One of our goals is to make sure that this session is useful for you, that we can answer some of your questions or drive the conversation however you want it to go. But before we do that, I wanted to share that I've compiled some resources for everyone. So I'll send these out, but there's 3 kind of tiers that I have made. So first, in this purple block, there's free block-based coding platforms that you can use, and they're all hyperlinked for you. Second, in the blue box, there are free educator tools. And by tools, I mean lesson plans, projects, curriculum. Those are those activities that are like the click and go, as we call it, that you could use in your classroom if you're in that position of like, I'm looking for something that I could use tomorrow. And then finally, in the orange box, you know, and all of your free time to pick up some light reading material. But if you're interested in any of kind of the research type articles, I've cited some of those for you as well. All right, Oki, I'm going to toss it back to you. And I'm really excited for the discussion. Oki, you're muted. Oh, no.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, you're still muted.
That was my fault.
All right.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me now? Right.
Yeah. I
was behaving. So I would like to come back to the framing of it in the beginning and ending. So seems a little bit like NGSS storyline. We ask the question, can we answer the question at the end of the instruction? So it's a little bit like that before we get into discussion. So I do think it's really remarkable that traditionally we just did about, it was until the framework. We're talking about what? A decade ago. And then we thought the new framework and standards are cool. And that's what we are currently right here. And then we are trying to figure out what would be our new normal for STEM education, and what would be the role of students, and then what does it look like? So I would like to just share 2 thoughts for all of us in the STEM education community to think about. One is that I consider this as real change from the perspective of students. Here, students were told what to do. It didn't make any sense, but I was told what to do. Here, they thought that it's really cool that I am like scientists and engineers. I'm participating. You know, when I think about this and SAIL+CTM and computational thinking, now students are giving the command to my agents to carry out. So when we were writing that part of the writing the curriculum, the standards, we say that if you can Google the information, it's not worthy of instructional time. Instead of students are figuring out what to do and solve problems. Here, what I'm thinking is that when students can get the information by saying, Alexa, tell me, play Beethoven's Symphony No. 9. Well, then what does that mean? Children have the power to click it, give a command, what to do, what not to do. I think it's just such an incredible way of thinking of what? Like that. I don't think children will go back from giving command here to being told what to do. So that's one. The second, see, it was a big change from the traditional thinking into contemporary thinking of doing science. And when I was just giving presentations, the educators will say, but okay, it's very exciting, but education system is not ready to do the standards because it's just a way too demanding. And I always felt saying, I'm sorry, but I don't have the answer. It's the educational system issue, and I cannot change the education system unless I would be the Secretary of Education. Now, right now, I don't feel too bad about, I don't say sorry anymore. And I say, why? I'm just thinking that the standards are here, and we are closer to the future. If we had not undertaken the standards and still keep the traditional view from being told what to do and giving command, that would be such a big jump, that would be almost impossible. So actually I'm changing from, can we implement the standards, saying, I'm sorry, I don't have the power to change the education system, to at least we are getting closer to the future, and education system and the society will have to figure it out. Otherwise, the education system will become irrelevant. So I don't say sorry anymore. We have to do something about it. So why is it important? So I'm going to say that I was never a politically active person, because politics did not make any difference to me. I would carry on my work, and it was like a normal chaos. Only in the past year, I learned, wow, we have to do something. And when I think about the COVID climate, health, science disciplines, and then equity and its economy, and then we get back to who we are. And it's the role of STEM education. So I have no reservation of advocating and asking the STEM education community, what do we do? How do we help? What does it mean for STEM education or science education? And we are using computational thinking as in service of science, so it's a science. Biden's administration made it very clear that science is at the center. And it's the equity that we have to put at the center. So we are not doing science, oops, we forgot the equity. No, equity is at the center, and then science serves those who are most affected. So that's my final thought on, Ellie, I know I'll continue. So here is a traditional and contemporary and moving into the future. Curriculum demanding, but we have no choice. Just that's the world is changing. How do we figure out the logistics? I don't say sorry to the NGSS anymore. We just have to figure it out and make it work. Sounds like a Jean-Luc Picard of next, the Star Generation. Make it so. And then what do we do in your school district and floor is open? So that's that. We would like to open up conversation and our staff. And we have a small number. So why don't we unmute and then have a conversation? What do you think? Ellie, do you have any thoughts to share?
Sure. I saw Jamie, you unmuted. Would you like to share before? I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, no, I did. I just, I think that this is the second time that I've heard O'Keely talk, and the first time I've heard about this version of this computational thinking. I thought of mathematics because I'm the math TOSA in our district, and now the last couple of years the STEM TOSA. And it's been surprising to me how difficult it is to move our district to have any science right now this year in front of kids while we live through a pandemic. It's like just shocking, the pushback that we don't have time, and what the last graphic of the students with the what is coming, it's just foreshadowing of how our system is already becoming obsolete for our kids, and they're living it every day right now. So it's not like even the future, it's what our kids are living right now. That big question mark is what makes it so difficult for teachers and the system to connect to homes right now, I feel like, with even any learning.
So I'm in the middle of doing a disease unit, and we were just today doing some computational thinking. We were doing the modeling of a fake like flu, and we were just talking about what it could look like. And you're right, we don't have enough time for science. We have 3 days, but some of that has to be office hours and blah, blah, blah. And, it's like all these other pieces that you have to accommodate. But I have 3 days of science that are available to me. And it is in no way enough to get depth of science. So.
Carla, are you secondary or elementary?
I'm secondary, but I'm 6th grade, so I'm right on that edge. So.
It's been shocking to me for elementary at the math and science, math and reading, and yet to push folks to think about doing that through real world, like scientific thinking, or like it, they're spent. And because we haven't envisioned and we won't pause to envision, we continue to spin our wheels with old, and kids aren't connecting to the content then, and they're disengaging. And teachers are working so hard. And if we can move to that question mark, right, I think that people will come back to learning.
Feel worried it's going to get worse before it gets better because of learning loss, which when I look into what that actually means, like one paper that was cited was just a projection based on summer break, which is like, that's not even real. But I think that's something I know we all are pushing back on that, because as teachers, we've seen like kids are learning a lot. First of all, it just might not look like what translates on a test, but also they're going through trauma, and this year has been so hard for kids. And so like, I hope we can keep pushing to reframe that narrative, because I think my concern is that learning loss narrative is going to keep pushing science to the wayside, because it's all math and reading. Like, we have to get them back. We have to make up for lost time, instead of, like you said, Jamie, like, how about we stop doing things that have never worked, because we've never gotten those scores to go up, and we keep trying it anyway. But why don't we try something different, like centering the learning in their actual lived experience and doing it through science and social studies?
That's how I think of it. I think of it as, it's my job to teach language within my classes. It's my job to teach not only language, but also how do we picture that concept or idea. And in this case, we're talking diseases this week. So how does that make sense in a 6th grade brain? And hopefully they walk away with a real understanding of diseases in general, and hopefully COVID eventually more specifically.
So what I'm thinking is, Jamie and Carla, and Leah, I'm thinking the pandemic will eventually be under control. So the question is, after this, are we ready? when we go back. I mean, the normalcy will take some time, but it's going to be over at some point. I assume that, I'm just thinking right now in education, the two biggest issues are reopening schools and then state assessment that we thought that it's not going to happen, and now we are doing it. I said, what? Okay, that's a couple of things. And after that, whether they're done well or not, we'll go back. So when people are talking about, even when we write something about remote instruction, are we talking about remote instruction as an emergency mode of instruction, or is it something that we would like to carry on by looking at the affordances? So this, I consider this as a transition. We are going through a really hard time, but at some point we'll get vaccinated and people are going back to the classroom. That's what's happening with you right now, going back to the classroom. The question is, when we go back, then what? Then what? Let me just say one other thing. Again, I know it's being recorded, but I say it to the world now. I was not very politically active. That normal craziness did not affect me one way or the other. It's just I thought no. But when COVID-19 was a hoax and climate change was hoax and we don't have equity problem, I thought, what? English is my second language, and am I hearing right or not? So it's a different ways of thinking, and if any, when I'm sharing, it is true. Oregon, Portland, Seattle, East Coast and West Coast, the progress thinking. I know that you went through the orange sky thinking this is an apocalypse. That's what apocalypse looks like. That's what I heard. That you had no place to go. You could not go outside, you couldn't go inside, you were completely trapped and holy what? And then you had all the storm. And at least in education, I would say that nobody is sad to see Betsy DeVos go. We are happy with our new Dr. Miguel Cardona. So I consider that this is a time that we help push the education system. So I would like to ask my colleagues to think of, after this emergency, after when things come back, then how do we place ourselves? That's one. The second is, when you think about the administration of priorities, these are real science issues that require complex thinking. And they are the priorities. I'm just saying, what? They are the priorities on the top with equity? But you get the idea. I think we should be the friends and allies to push it. So that's my advocacy. I'm really serious. May I say something Ellie knows? I know it's being recorded, but I'm going to say it. We're having a conversation, right? So I'm using myself as an example. I know that I have only 24 hours, and Ellie will say, okay, don't get sick, we need you. Okay, she said that. So when I was so excited with the nomination of Cardona, I sent an email to his office saying that I would like to volunteer to serve. I did. Carla, I did. I know I have my own work, but I wanted to serve. But this is the moment. In my 50s, I was always saying that I was so blessed to be invited to be the writer of the NGSS. I was so fortunate to be invited to be part of the Understanding Language Initiative at Stanford. I was invited. I'm 61 going to 62, and I'm realizing, wow, I need to create something to invite someone in the 50s and 40s saying, I was so fortunate that I was invited. No, it's a different mindset. I see Blake on the screen. Blake, I did. I said, I'm not looking for political appointment, but I wanted to serve because it's a STEM for equity. And all of us take leadership at the school level, in the system, in research, in some areas. And if you just speak up and say, I'm a leader and I'm creating something. But anyway, do you want to hear what happened after I volunteered to say, I would love to serve in a committee or task force or something, as if I have 48 hours? Because I was so motivated. This is what happened. A day after, I got a response. No, someone else nominated me, saying, we received the voluntary work of Dr. Lee, and we are appreciative. A day after, I said, whoa, the confirmation even did not happen. And then the following day, we would like to see Dr. Lee's resume on file. So I'm having this sense of activism. And this is what we say, citizen science, citizen activism. Because we do not want it to go back after 4 years. We have to make it work. But anyway, I'm sharing with my colleagues of my naive attitude of I volunteered and I'm actually served on the task force and I wanted to, even if I lose 2 hours of sleep every day, because it's such an important moment. I said it. Any feedback, comment? I know you smile. Those on the, I did hearing.
I get so focused on what I'm doing that I'm impressed that you're thinking outside of that. So I'm impressed.
I did. I think it's our turn to do something in our own way. And I'm extending what we say of a citizen science. Well, we should do the citizen activism to make a difference. I'm really so excited about a few things. One, again, the COVID-19 climate and health care. Those are all science disciplines and they are the priorities. And I said, oh, wow, that's what we dream of doing, STEM education, to solve complex societal problems, to improve the lives of the people. And we are doing the work. Yes, Becky, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you for sharing your story. And I have to say, as I was listening to you, something that was bubbling up for me as we think about what the future holds for the education system is engaging with students to hear their voices and find out what their needs are, because they know what they want. And they're smart enough to find resources, as we were talking about, using their computational thinking, their systems thinking, even though they don't necessarily have the words to explain it like that. But you know, I have a middle school student at home, and he tells me every day about how this education system is failing him and how he learns more learning on his own than he does from school. And, you know, I just think, you know, we have a diverse group of amazing students throughout our world and throughout our country that can tell us and help us reformulate our education system. And I wonder where is that space for them to be leaders in order to take the initiative similar to what you've done? Where's the opportunities for them to stand up and say, I have some ideas and I want to voice those ideas?
So Becky, to follow on your thought, and this is my thinking. So we students became from passive listeners to active participants to give command to my agents. That's the transition that we are seeing, right? By giving commands to my agents. I was thinking this is so prevalent in our thought as even though we mean well. So one example, we keep saying about the asset versus deficit. Now, we are very good at defining what someone is lacking and fixing the problem. So the example is English learners. English learners don't have English. It's lacking. We fix it by giving vocabulary and grammar and language because it's lacking. And I was just thinking this though. So instead of saying what you are lacking and I'm giving it to you because you are lacking, we typically say, show me what you've got. Let's work with what you have and we'll get there. But we say that, show me what you've got. And show me what you've got is asset. I'm saying you are lacking English is a deficit and I'm going to fix it for you. So we have a lot of thinking to do as educators to change our thinking approach. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts in my apartment thinking, wow.
I'm curious about, I think we talked about this a little before our session started, but there's a lot of, I'm not saying this is the majority, but there are kids who are finding that distance learning is an improvement for them over being at school. And I know families, like especially, you know, maybe students who have like behavioral stuff going on at school, or they have ADHD, or sometimes parents are saying, my kid doesn't have to deal with racism at home the way they have to deal with it at school. I mean, there's so many different reasons. I feel like as a system, we need to think about, like, first of all, why are students struggling at school and what can we do to make school better for them? And also, I think some of this might be here to stay. Like there might be like charter school options or just, you know, CDL options for families who choose that. And, you know, what does that future look like in terms of kids learning remotely, or maybe a hybrid situation where they do some of it independently? I think it's kind of interesting and exciting in some ways that might have opened doors for some kids to have a better educational experience. There's a lot that I think we're all learning about, but I'm just curious to see where that might go.
On the other hand, Leah, yes, it's a different ways, right? On the other hand, when I learned about the schools and districts giving the first choice to students with disabilities and English learners to come to the classroom for in-person, I thought, that's interesting, and why would that be? And you can think of the reasons like that students some students may need a breakfast and lunch. That's just a very immediate reason. Another reason may be that their parents are essential workers who have to go to work, so they cannot stay home. That's just necessity. The third is that some students just may need a more in-person instruction and support so that they get this extra support. But the fourth one is this. I'm just realizing, well, the schools and districts do not want to be liable for not providing the service according to the accountability. So it could be part of the litigation. Well, if that is a part of it, why not use it as needed? So that it's just that the opportunities are options are much more open rather than one way of doing it. And how does that look like? I'm so glad that we have this discussion. Right now we are in emergency and just trying to turn the corner and see the end of the light. But then what? After the emergency, what? We have the choice of being told and complain and worry, or do something. Do something. Collectively or individually.
I don't think I had ever thought about like something that you just said, okay, makes me think that by prioritizing as this gift our students that have been farthest from opportunity, we also have separated and said what we do in our classrooms isn't for them, right? Like in some way, as opposed to pushing on the system to say, how can we make the classroom more for everyone? And in deficit thinking, like I'm trying to think of like, what can we take forward and what we've learned, but like, what are we going to commit to leaving behind? right? Like, what do I not want to carry with me after the pandemic? Like, and as I support teachers, like, you were able to have access to kids one-on-one and see their eyes, right? Like, how can we make that happen after the pandemic? Like, you were able to, you know, see student thinking with technology, right? That you would have normally like waited to collect till after the lesson, even though there's other strategies, but like, how can we do that after the pandemic? Like, what do I leave behind and what I want to take forward is kind of what's in my head right now.
Yeah. So Ellie is the lead for the CTM part of the work. I'm one of those who, Ellie, I don't know how to turn on the computer. I apologize, Ellie, but it just is like, Ellie is the leader. We consider CTM, no, I'm joking, kidding. We consider CTM as the future because it's a way to get to science. We don't do CTM as the end, it's as in the service of doing science as needed.
Also, like Becky had said, I know she had to leave, but we're also doing CTM because the students like it and enjoy it and say that it's important, and that like the curriculum often is not matching what their needs are, whether it's to get into college, whether it's beyond, or just for the workforce. So I think that that's an important connection too, that right now CTM often feels disconnected, or like we're having to push this conversation against like where teachers are already overwhelmed, we're busy, we have too much going on, like this is just impossible. But we're trying to balance that with this real need that the kids are coming to us with a perspective like, but this is my world and I need to learn this and this should be part of my curriculum. So I think that that's an interesting, it frames the conversation differently when we think about it from that conversation, where it's like, maybe this isn't as much of a fun extra add-on as it is a necessity that the kids will need.
Yeah, I think integrating it is key. Like, instead of, it's not like a extra or special or something, but it's like it's just part of the learning.
If we were gonna, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go, please.
Oh, we were gonna bridge from teachers, and think again, I am a elementary lens. If we were going to bridge from teachers who were doing like hour of code and had time that they were using some of those block model, like the block programs you were talking about, do you have a recommended like next step for an administration to think about, or a teacher to think about, to connect that with the why of science?
Okay, do you want me to take it or do you want to take it?
You take it.
So this sounds like a shameless plug, but our answer to that question is we couldn't answer that question a couple of years ago, and that frustrated us because we had that inquiry. And I think our answer is the curriculum that we're developing. And so I think the answer is the next step is to provide teachers with resources that meaningfully embed CTM into science curriculum that is aligned with what we see this vision of science looking like, phenomenon-based, three-dimensional learning, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that we need curriculum materials that are educative for the teachers, meaning that they have specific features that make it easy for teachers to also learn how to code while they're teaching that programming as well. And I think if the reason that we've put such efforts into the materials into curriculum is because I think, not that there's a magic bullet or a simple solution, but I think that that is one way that we can start giving answers instead of just throwing our hands up and being like, this is never going to happen. So I think a next step is one curriculum that looks like that. And then as a follow-up or a tag team to that, from an administration perspective, the recognition that is going to take teachers time and resources, and to give teachers that training as well as support, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that that's the first thing that comes to my mind, is giving teachers meaningful curriculum that is realistic, that's fun, that's engaging, and also aligned and rigorous.
So So ours is very much based on the NGSS, and it's a natural evolution from the NGSS to CT, because when you get to the microbes that are too small to see, how do you help the students explain beyond the describe or read from computational thinking? The complex interactions of the ecosystem, how do you help students explain computational thinking, because they can manipulate pollution, plastic pollution. You cannot do the engineering in a classroom. So how do you do that? Again, complex issue using computational thinking. The space science, too big to see and you cannot relate. How do you do that? So we are using the affordances of a computational thinking at very strategic places to help students learn science. Go ahead.
And it started to, like, there were these moments where when that happened, it was incredible for both teachers and students, because in the sense of, for example, like when
thank you.
Like in the engineering that Oki was just talking about, we're on the elementary level. So they were talking about plastic pollution. I won't get into the whole unit, but the engineering before computational modeling was like, let's do a campaign in our school, which was great. And there, but it was limiting, and it was kind of, there was a sense of like, okay, we put recycling bins in our school. When we started doing computational thinking, the opportunities that the design solutions that kids could test and try were really incredible, and their thinking was so creative. It was interesting. We and I say we, the teacher group that we work with, were brainstorming what we thought the design solutions would be that kids would come up with. They far exceeded what we thought that they would come up with, and having these really innovative, creative ideas. So I think it's moments like that where you're like, oh, that is powerful and can work. And then it's, it wasn't taking away, and sometimes it was reducing class time, because, you know what I mean? I think that can be powerful.
I know people are leaving.
Yeah, I know
it's
after 5, but thanks all so much for being here and having this conversation, and I hope we can keep this going. I know this is just a time where a lot of people's bandwidth is super short, just because of all the things that are out of our control, but I would love to continue this next year.
Leah, I have just to you, but just a few people. You may consider the Oregon Science Teachers Association may have a couple of sessions on how do we define ourselves? What would be our future for the state? How do we collectively organize our thinking and ideas so that it becomes collective work? And then you can take it to legislation and other things, but not individually. I would propose that the state conference has a couple of sessions or special session, have a discussion on who we are, what we do collectively, like a Black Lives Matter protest. If young children can do it, adults should do it. I'm not kidding. Carla, thank you for laughing. Oh yeah, if teens can do TikTok and all that, then stand, and then 20s can do protests on the street and organize. I mean, it's a lot of work organizing to do that. Well, adults should be able to. Jamie, you're smiling. Right?
Really good. I like have to go, and I'm like, keep talking. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Leah, stay
Thank
on.
you so much.
Thank you for
Thanks,
doing
Carla.
the model. Carla, you should speak up.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm really impressed by this, and I want to keep this conversation going. I want to take a look at that curriculum, because I am doing a lot of this work, but I think there's so much to be done that I'm not doing, and I'd love to continue it.
You know, a great quote I heard, Carla, innovation isn't starting from scratch, it's building on the work of others and taking it to the next level. And I think that's something as teachers we understand is, there's a lot of people doing this work out there. We just need to connect and learn from each other and keep that going. So
Right, and that's why I go to OSTA, because it helps me get my head around the next piece that I want to add.
yes,
So,
I'm so glad.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks, you
Carla.
guys.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.